Yo everybody, Season 9 of Smite is underway. 9.1 update dropped on January 25th, and the patch notes are so long that I wanted to do a few videos going over a whole bunch of the changes happening. This video specifically is going to be about glyphs. Glyphs are a new mechanic inside of Smite. They're basically like T4 versions of items that have different passives put onto them. So let's hop right into those changes now. We'll go over glyphs. I'll be learning kind of right along with you guys. Alright, like I said, glyphs are basically T4 items. How Smite describes them is they're going to have the exact same stats and passive as the base item, the T3 item that already existed, but with an additional passive choice that you have to make, basically. They're going to cost 600 more gold beyond whatever that tier 3 item costs, and there is no level restriction on buying this. So whenever you get the gold in your game, you could upgrade to the tier 4 item, the glyph, if you want to. You could stick with the tier 3 item that you were already going to get anyways. You kind of have those options, so it's really about if you think you have the money to spend on the glyph or not. So the first couple glyphs that we'll go over are the two glyphs attached to the Heartward Amulet. So Heartward Amulet, just as a reminder, 55 magical protection, 250 health. Allied gods within 70 units have their magical protections increased by 20 and their MP5 increased by 30. Usually I try to frame all of these changes around Joust because that's the game mode that I play. But either way, we're going to go over some of the glyphs and I'll give you my opinion on them in Joust. You can form your own opinions on them in other game modes. First glyph, Amulet of Silence. So it has all those stats that we just went over with Heartward Amulet, but now it also has the passive of you gain a stack anytime an enemy within 40 units casts an ability. At 5 stacks, your next basic attack generates against an enemy god will silence them for 1.5 seconds. Effect can only occur every 45 seconds. Silence is a very strong mechanic, right? A 1.5 second silence stops the enemy from doing something, right? For a pretty decent amount of time. If you think of 1.5 seconds, it's pretty much the equivalent of like a Kepri pull, I believe. So that first tier of a Kepri pull, I think, is 1.5 or 1.6 seconds. So that's not a short amount of time for somebody to not be able to dash, to escape, to use their own, maybe CC ability to keep you from coming after them. So this will be a pretty interesting tool on some Guardians. I don't necessarily like Heartward Amulet that much in Joust. I do think MP5 is super good, but I think a reason why they did this glyph to a lot of items was that they were underbought. So now you have this little incentive to buy these underbought items because you can have a tier 4. At least the support items, that's kind of my feeling on it. But I think this item will be good. That extra effect can set your teammates up for follow-up as long as you know you have it and you know they're silent. So communicate, and I think you'll be able to use this item fairly well. The second glyph item in the Heartward Amulet tree is Amulet of the Stronghold. Pretty simple, 20% of your physical protections are converted to magical protections. So having this item allows you to build more physical protection items and less magical protection items and still have the benefit of getting magical protections. So if you think of someone like maybe a Vamana who also scales with physical items on his attack speed, I think movement speed and attack speed, an item like this is perfect to just slot in one place and you don't have to build any other magical items. So pretty cool. You also have, if you're playing against 2 physical Joust gods, you can build this item and then focus all the other items around kind of physical defense if you need to. So interesting glyphs. I'm excited for some of these. They are expensive, especially in Joust. 600 gold is basically another tier 1 item. So you're gonna have to really monitor what that looks like, but I think both of these upgrades are gonna make Amulet a lot more viable than it was before. So quick little adjustment to Amulet of the Stronghold. In PTS, they did decrease the protection conversion from 20% to 10%. So again, reviewing from the original notes, 10% of your physical protections are converted to magical protections. So not quite as potent, and maybe not the only magical defense item you want in your build anymore. I'll have to test this one out. I still think it'll be good on very specific gods, but a little bit worse than what we had originally thought. The next two glyphs we'll go over are the upgrades from Breastplate of Valor. So to review, the original Breastplate, 2300 cost, 65 physical protections, 300 mana, 10 MP5, 20% cooldown reduction. CDR obviously super valuable in Joust, but with no other real like outstanding stats on this item, I don't think that it was really part of any staple build. But now that we have the glyphs, that might change. The first one, Breastplate of Determination. Each time you get hit by an ability, you gain a stack of 5 protections that corresponds to whatever damage type you were hit by. So if it's magic, you're gonna get 5 protections of magical protections. If it's a physical ability that you're hit by, you're gonna get 5 physical protections, and that can stack up to 4 times of each one. So you can basically have an extra, 20 protections of magic and physical if the enemies are focusing you. Once you hit those stacks of both, you gain both of those stacks, you get a burst of 20% movement speed, and you double your protections gained by the effect. After 8 seconds, those stacks are completely removed. I think this one is a little bit harder to use in Joust, at least to get that like full passive, because you're either going to be facing one single physical god in most cases, or one single magical god. So to get both of those stacks, somebody needs to damage you 4 times in a row from one of those either physical or magical delegations, right? So you're maybe never going to get that full 20% movement speed effect unless you're building this on a squishy, right? I guess I'm thinking more of like from a support standpoint. I don't know why I would build this item, but if you are maybe throwing this in as like your one single defense item on a squishy, that could actually be pretty useful. I'm thinking of it a little bit now. So that might be a better use case for this specific glyph tree. The other glyph tree is Breastplate of Vigilance. When your ultimate ability has finished casting, you provide an aura in a 40 unit range around you, reducing basic attack damage from enemies by 30% for 5 seconds. I like this one a lot. Something to just keep in mind is that aura, right? The casting, once it is finished casting, you provide an aura in 40 unit range. That does count as an aura item. So I've been thinking of like putting this on Ares because cooldown is good on Ares. Mana is pretty good on Ares. It never hurts. Physical protection is pretty decent on him, and then if you have that aura here, it is not that bad at all. Pulling the enemies toward you, right, also with Ares ult, once it's done, they're going to do 30% less damage, so they have less tools to defend themselves. So I think Breastplate of Vigilance is the superior one in Joust. In Conquest Arena, that might be a little bit different because you have more of a chance to get hit by more of those different physical or magical abilities. So again, not a popular item for me necessarily in Joust, Breastplate of Valor previously, but I will definitely think about picking it up more for that Vigilance upgrade. Another quick update on Breastplate of Vigilance as well. In the second round of PTS, they decreased that basic attack damage debuff from 30% to 15%. So after you ult, you're only going to be debuffing the enemy's basic attacks by 15% instead of 30. So not quite as potent. Still, I think if you have that big team fight ultimate that's pulling enemies towards you or setting your enemies up in a place where your team can follow up, it's still going to be an effective item for you and your teammates. The next available glyphs that can be attached to the tier 3 item is Deathbringer. So let's go over Deathbringer's stats. 2,900 gold, 55 physical power, 30% critical strike chance, and critical strike bonus damage dealt is increased by 30%. So obviously this is kind of the capstone for a lot of those crit-based builds. Something to keep in mind just right off the jump is Deathbringer's already 2,900 cost. So to upgrade from Deathbringer to either one of the glyphs is going to be 3,500 gold. That is a lot of gold in Joust to just kind of sit on, and Deathbringer already took a while to get online in that game mode specifically. So really, unless you get super late game, I think it's going to be hard to kind of use these glyphs. But either way, let's go over them. Critical hits on enemy gods afflict them with poison for 2 seconds. The poison slows them by 10% and reduces their damage output by 15%. As you noticed, Poison Star has been removed from the game. They've basically taken Poison Star's passive and thrown it onto Deathbringer, this envenomed Deathbringer. So crit, not a super reliable mechanic in Joust. Also one that kind of takes such a long time to get online that you can get snowballed on pretty early. But I do like the fact that if you're going into a crit build, you're going to have a 10% slow and a 15% damage output on whoever you're boxing, basically. Also thought about maybe throwing this on, like, you know, a Vamana or something, where you're trying to basic attack them pretty often, or Osiris or something like that. Again, it's pretty expensive, so we'll see if that actually comes to fruition or not. But let's get into the other version of Deathbringer. The other glyph upgrade on Deathbringer is Malicious Deathbringer, and you guessed it, it's Malice's passive basically plopped onto Deathbringer. Successfully hitting an enemy god with a crit will subtract 1 second from all your abilities on cooldown, other than your ultimate ability. I think this one is better in a lot of cases than Envenomed Deathbringer 2, just because having more of those abilities up more often, if you're critting, is clearly kind of superior in Joust. You're always going to be team fighting. If you have your abilities up and you can use them, you're just putting yourself and your team at an advantage. So Deathbringer, not a hugely popular item in Joust, very expensive, kind of want to build it late. You kind of want to build other crit items to really like take advantage of the mechanic on Deathbringer, and that's not usually the most ideal build path in Joust either. But if you're building it, keep in mind that you do have the option to either kind of have the slow passive effect or the reduced cooldown passive effect. The next option that you'll have as far as glyphs go is putting glyphs onto Jotunn's Wrath. Jotunn's Wrath, already a good item in Joust. It is only 2,200 as a total cost, so it's pretty cheap. You can get it online quickly or really anywhere in your build if you want to. 45 physical power, 150 mana, 10 pen, and 20% cooldown reduction. This is one of the most popular items within that mace tree. Brawler's Beatstick is another really popular one. But if you're going to be going in that mace tree, Jotunn's is kind of the choice one for a lot of warriors specifically. I think hunters can build it too, and assassins obviously, but warriors a lot of times they want that cooldown so they can use their abilities up more often. Really good item already, right? It's a staple in a lot of builds regardless of what physical role you're going. And the glyphs are no different. The item's already good. Both of the glyphs are really good options depending on what you're looking to do. The first glyph is Jotunn's Ferocity. Your next basic attack marks an enemy god. If you hit that marked enemy or that marked enemy hits you with a basic, you get a stack. Each of those stacks provide 2% increased damage towards that enemy, stacking up to 10 times. So you could be doing 20% more damage to that enemy just by having this item. If you get into any sort of boxing match, that's obviously a huge advantage. Or if you have a warrior that can really just beat on somebody else with auto attacks, a Gilgamesh, Osiris, someone like that, you're going to be doing 20% more damage. Maybe not 20% because you're not always going to reliably stack that 10 times. But even if you hit them with 5 autos in a row, that's 5 times 2%, 10% more damage. Nothing to really sneeze at. The other upgrade, which I think is even better, is if you drop beneath 40% health, you get 10% movement speed. You get 40% physical ability lifesteal for 5 seconds. So think of you being in danger and hitting one ability and getting 40% lifesteal off that. Maybe it's an ultimate or a really big chunk ability that you hit. You have so much more ability to survive. Yes, it may only occur every 15 seconds, but really, if you can survive and buy that time, it's going to be up again by the time you fight. So realistically, this is better on hunters because they need it more to survive. They're going to be at that 40% health threshold more often. Assassins too. Warriors, I think they can honestly use either one of these pretty equally effectively depending on who your comp is and who the enemy comp is. But this, I think, the glyphs on Jotunns are both really, really good. Probably going to be just one of those must-build items in every single game almost. At least that's how I see it. We'll see if that comes to be in reality. But super good glyphs, already a cheap item. No reason for you not to build it. Jotunn's Vigor also got adjusted a little bit after the second round of PTS. They decreased the physical ability lifesteal from 40% to 30%. So you're still going to have 30% of that lifesteal when you drop below 40% health. And that happens every 15 seconds. So I don't see this as being too huge of a nerf. Jotunn's is pretty much a must-buy anyways, and this is kind of the more consistent of those two glyphs. So still buy it. This shouldn't dissuade you from getting Jotunn's Vigor. It will still be good. The last item that is getting this glyph option is Rod of Tahuti. So Rod of Tahuti, looking at the stats, 3,000 gold. I believe this is the most expensive item in the game. 140 magical power, tons of magical power, 30 MP5. You're going to be regenerating that mana super quickly. Percent pen, 10% magical penetration, so obviously this kind of works better as one of those late game items. And then the passive on it, really good passive already as it exists. Basic attack and abilities get 25% additional magical power against those low targets. So if you're trying to finish somebody off, this passive allows you to just kind of help yourself do that. One thing to remember, 3,000 gold, that means that the upgrades are going to be 3,600 gold total. That is a ton of gold. You're probably already building Tahuti on some gods anyways though, so maybe not as big of a deal as like Deathbringer, that it's expensive and you kind of have to really push yourself to work it in. If you're playing against double tanks, you want Tahuti, you want Opshard, you want those percent pen items, so you're probably building it, so why not just get into that glyph. So the first option is Calamitous Rod of Tahuti as far as Rod of Tahuti glyphs. Successfully hitting an enemy god with an ability calls down a meteor that lands after 1.5 seconds, dealing 100 plus this is actually 40% of your magical power. This was adjusted in a later PTS, so it's 100 plus 40% of magical power damage in a 15 unit radius, and it can occur once every 30 seconds because this was also buffed a little bit. It was one of the more underwhelming items in PTS, so they lowered the cooldown on it so that meteor can kind of strike more often and do a little bit more in those fights. However, I still think the main problem with this specific item is that the meteor lands after 1.5 seconds after you hit an ability. That gives enemies the time they need to run away or jump away or get away from that meteor coming down, because it doesn't chase the enemy necessarily where they go, right? If you hit an enemy with an ability, the meteor comes down where you hit them with that ability. So they do have the ability to escape. 15 unit radius isn't that large, so it's just not very consistent as far as damage goes. If you have a high CC god, maybe like Nox or I don't know, somebody else that can really just lock someone in place for a long time and they can't do anything about it, maybe this item is going to be better on people like that. But personally, I think the other upgrade to Rod of Tahuti, Nimble Rod of Tahuti, is just better in a lot of cases. It really depends on if you're AA based or if you're ability based, because you're not really going to build Nimble on anybody that's not attack speed based, that doesn't benefit from attack speed, right? Getting into Nimble Rod of Tahuti, for every 40 magical power you have, you gain 2% attack speed. So this is going to be really, really good on people like Kronos, on people like Sol, on people like Poseidon even. they're building power. You get 140 power, right? Even just from this item alone. So any other power you build is obviously going to be adding to that. But just from Rod of Tahuti, you're going to get 6% extra attack speed just passively, which is really good. A lot of those gods are just able to chunk already without any extra attack speed. So this is good on those specific gods. Overall, you're already building Tahuti in Joust a lot of times, especially against double tank comps. So these are going to be bonuses, essentially. You can think of them as little bonuses. Instead of buying like a pot, right? You buy the glyph upgrade, and now you have that for the rest of the game. So Tahuti's a good item. It's a good thing to just slot in your builds. And both of these glyphs are something extra for not that much gold. All right, that's that. That is all the glyphs coming out. I'm pretty excited for them. I really want to try them out. I'm going to probably try to force at least one of them into all of my builds for a little while just to see how it feels, and if it's not too expensive in my Joust builds. I'm guessing there'll probably be a few of those items that are just kind of core to every single one of my games. So if you learned something, if this helped you, if you got up to speed a little bit more on Season 9, please like, follow, subscribe. I'm also giving away $60 worth of video games to one lucky follower out of my first 100 Twitch follows. So I'll do a random drawing. You get to choose what games you want or what game you want, as long as it's $60. You will get that if I choose you. Keep an eye out for more videos. There's a ton of updates happening in Season 9, so I'm still going to go over all of the item changes, the god changes, and then try to outline like crit and what the difference is with crit for this season. So make sure you follow it and keep up with me so you can get those videos directly to you. But thanks again, you guys, so much for watching. I'll talk to you guys next time.